Hello, and welcome to week 4 of the Magic Sauce Founder Journey podcasts. It's a bit of a mouthful. I think I may need to find some shorter way of conveying the title of that. But this week we've got Louise, the founder of Pickle, and massively interesting character to me. We'd worked together previously when Louise had kicked off what was then Inlet. Uh, as an insurtech business, and having watched it sort of grow and weather a storm of a pandemic and literally put everything on the line to launch the thing, and having faith in that vision, I just thought it would be a great journey, particularly as an underrepresented founder, to share with other underrepresented founders as well, to share where you've been and how you got there. So welcome, Louise.
Hello, thanks, Chris. Nice to be here.
Likewise. So I'm going to go back kind of to the beginning. I know your background is sort of from insurance anyway, and working for large insurers and stuff. What drove you to go into that industry in the first place? And what was the earliest start like for Louise? Where did you come from? What's your origin story?
Yeah, okay. Well, where do I start on that then? I'll start with the very beginning then. So I mean, I grew up in Norfolk, in North Norfolk, in Cromer, and my parents on both sides really are people who've come to this country, immigrants, effectively in search of a better life. And my grandfather is sort of from Black South African heritage or coloured South African heritage. He came over sort of during apartheid, and then my father is Sicilian. And they came over. His family came over not that long after the war years. So the main motive was really just looking for a better life. And so I think that that instilled in me, as it does for a lot of first generation sort of immigrant families, that kind of work ethic, that strong work ethic, and that striving to believe that you can build stuff yourself, and you can, the world is your oyster. You can go after what you want to. And on both sides of my family, they were very successful. My father started up at a garden centre in Overstrand with my grandfather. So many people do know my dad as the crazy Italian from Overstrand Garden Centre. So I was, sort of slave labour in the potting shed and in the tea rooms and stuff like that. So I from a young age I was sort of earning my keep really. But I suppose what that meant was that I just wasn't afraid of starting my own business. So I'd seen my parents do it; they're quite successful. It gave them a lot of freedom, and that was something that I've just never really been afraid of. It was not something I sort of thought, yes, that's what I'm going to do from the off, but it didn't, I guess, daunt me. And then I was very privileged to have a very good education. I went to a private school. I was very good at maths. I went on and did a degree in maths. I actually stayed locally. I went to the University of East Anglia, which was fantastic fun. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And as I think a lot of people who did maths at the time at University of East Anglia, we all pretty much got recruited into Aviva. And it wasn't a grand plan of, I want to go into actuarial and pricing and stuff like that. It's just if you've got that kind of degree, then, Aviva was looking for that. And I think they pretty much recruited probably about 2/3 of my year group actually that year that graduated with maths. So me and a lot of my graduate friends went along to Aviva, and I worked for Aviva for 10 years. It's a fantastic company to start my career with. I learned a lot. I sort of worked my way up from the bottom. I worked in lots of different departments. I was fortunate to be given training in sort of pricing. I did a master's degree in that, sponsored by Aviva, and I also did accountancy as well. I became an accountant, so that gave me some really core sort of foundations skills. And I actually left when the RAC was sold by Aviva to the Carlyle Private Equity Group. And at the time, I was finance director for RAC Insurance. I've been in that role for about 5 years, and that was actually a startup within a large company. So Aviva started up RAC as an insurance broker within the company, and I was one of the first people on that business. So I was really, one of the key drivers of that growth in that particular company over the 5 years that I was there, and that was, tremendous growth journey. Didn't have to worry about funding. It was all funded by Aviva, but it was like being in a startup in a small in a big company. And then we sold it, and I went through a year process of selling that company with my founding team. So that was where I met most of my founding team, was various ones. My CFO, one of our partnerships directors, came in on that deal and helped us to put it all together, and that's where we met. And it was really that experience that for me then sort of cemented, actually, I'd really like to do this for myself. I enjoyed building that business, and when you see what it sells for, you're like, blimey, why am I not doing this for myself? So I think it was kind of after that, me and the people that are my founding team now, we sort of said, we'd like to do this, but we just weren't quite sure what to do, what the idea would be. We knew we would need a niche in the market. You're not going to start up a motor insurance company, because you're just going to compete with Aviva and Direct Line, and you're going to lose. So in the insurance market, you have to have a corner of the market that you can make your own.
Yeah.
So it took several years after that. So I went and I did several other jobs after that. I was head of pricing at Arthur J. Gallagher for the UK and international business. I was head of pricing at Sainsbury's and also at Co-op. So I went and did a number of other roles before. It was whilst I was working at the Co-op in Manchester that I was still living in Norfolk. I was travelling overnight to staying in Manchester several nights a week, and I got really sick and tired of staying in hotels. And one of my colleagues, who was also doing the hotel gig at the time, said, have you considered staying in an Airbnb? And that's really, 2015, that's really what introduced me to the Airbnb market. And so I started staying in some Airbnbs and was talking to the homeowners and realised that they had a really big problem with their insurance. And I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's something that I feel I can solve. And then the idea really for Pickle sprung from there.
Yeah, I mean that resonates, and I think the lucky thing in some ways with Norfolk is that a lot of people have come out of Aviva and gone and spun out their own thing when they've seen that there's gaps in that market and it may not fit with Aviva's own overarching vision. And Chris Sargison, who you know obviously quite well, he spoke a couple of weeks back about the same kind of thing. It was coming out of there going, nobody's actually done this yet, and it's a problem for me. I've seen this problem for other people. So that validation piece, obviously, it's something we all push. I felt quite lucky with you coming into the Accelerator, because most companies that come into accelerators don't have any validation or very little validation. But I mean, by the time we met, you'd already got 60 policies, I think.
Yes,
So,
I think
which
we
is
just
great.
pilot, hadn't we? Yeah.
Yeah. Which is great. You'd obviously gone out and researched and knew about that gap in the market. I guess you had a different insight, I guess, being from that pricing and actuarial background as well, because you already knew the stats and what was out there.
Yes, I mean, so I knew a lot about building insurance businesses. As I said, I'd had, really great experience at RAC in being able to do that, but I didn't know anything about running a startup company or about the challenges that you would need to face as a CEO going and raising funding and all of that, and the VC world and these seed raises, Series A, Series Bs, all of that. It's like you have to learn a new language.
Yeah.
And that was, that was for me was completely new, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I spent the first 2 years at Pickle in development. Pretty much, it takes a long time to bring insurance products to market, and we were underwriting our own insurance products because they were brand new, because nobody had done it before, so that took some time to develop. And then we did a 6-month pilot, could see that there was some demand for it and were ready to launch. And it was at that point, I think I was juggling being the head of pricing, being the head of underwriting, being the call center, being everything at that point. There was just me working full time. My co-founders, I have 4 of them. They were all working a day a week at that point. But we realised we've reached a critical point here where we actually need some staff. I couldn't be answering the phones anymore. And it was at that point that we realised, we need some funding. And prior to that, I'd put a second mortgage on my house. I'd put £150,000 into the company. My co-founders had also put money in. I think we had about 250,000 that we'd used to kind of bootstrap our way through that first 2 years. But then we realised, okay, we've got something here. We've got this proof of concept, but we've got to now grow it. And then the only way we were going to be able to grow it was to have funding behind us. So when I landed in the accelerator with you, Chris, I think I was at that point thinking, what do I do? How do I do? What's the pitch deck? And how do I actually then figure out how I go to market with this and get people to back me?
Yeah, I remember it, and it struck me at the time because that it's that other rare thing of people putting stuff on the line. I mean, how did that feel when you? Because obviously you have this vision, people need that product, but obviously, how scary was it to then go and sort of get that second mortgage and then put that house and money on the line and stuff? Did you just think, no, I believe in this much that it's a no-brainer for me, or was the sphincter going in and out a little at that point?
I was nervous. I wouldn't say that was one of my most nerve-wracking moments in my journey, but certainly I was nervous about it. But also at the time, I was doing some pretty good jobs in the insurance market. I was, head of pricing.
Yeah.
I knew that the worst case scenario was I'd have to go back to market again. And, despite the fact that I'd taken out quite a large mortgage on my house, I probably would be able to recover that. Might take some time, but I would be able to recover from it. So it was a calculated risk. I think probably I probably feel more for my boyfriend at the time because he was on the mortgage with me. So he was the one who was probably more having the blind faith in me. You are sure this is going to work, Whereas obviously I know I sort of have more insight as to what was happening at that point in the company.
Yeah. And you touched on that switch, I guess, of mindset, language, everything else from sort of 17 years in pricing and actuarial and insurance to the startup world. How much of a culture shock was that when you come and meet somebody like me that probably only speaks mostly in either jargon or potty mouth? I mean, that,
Well, it was refreshing. I mean, I'm used to jargon. The insurance market has a heck of a lot of jargon that you have to learn. And it was just, it was again, you had to learn a whole load of new stuff for the startup world. But the thing that was a breath of fresh air was, when I was working in these large companies, the reason I wanted to start a new one, apart from the experience at RAC, was just, discontent with the status quo. So there's lots of really brilliant people in these large insurance companies, and I really enjoyed working there, but it's so frustrating. Their technology is so out of date. There are some companies that are still using mainframes that have got a core that was built in the 1970s. So and the pace of that change is so slow. It's like moving a massive cruise liner, and even when they've started a project to migrate something, by the time they plan to finish it, the technology is going to be out of date again. So you just can't. For me, I just somebody that wanted to get on and get things done and try new things and experiment, and that just environment just wasn't conducive for that. So the startup environment is really conducive for that, and it was great, meeting other people that had that experience, were failing quickly, and that was fine, which isn't necessarily the culture that you find in those big companies. It's they don't really allow you to necessarily fail. It was really interesting, and what I really found was how supportive as well it was. The environment, the startup environment, particularly locally to East Anglia. I was really surprised, to be introduced to a whole network of people that had got businesses of all different types. And we're helping giving back. Lots of people who are angel investors now in Pickle, who provided a lot of help in those very, very early days. It was wonderful to become part of that. I think we're very lucky in East Anglia with that. I think that certainly when I've been in the markets in London, in the investment markets and the angel investment markets, there's not, I think, quite such a supportive network. It's a little bit tougher down there.
It can be a bit dog eat dog, and I've found that in the regions generally. But I think one of the great things about the pandemic is I should never utter those words. The great thing about the pandemic, but let's call it a positive to come out of the pandemic, was that a lot of these communities moved online as well, and a lot of those people who were based in London were introduced to a lot of people who were in the regions as well. And I found the same as you in some pockets in London, that it was very much dog eat dog. But then by working with other communities where that wasn't the norm, and being introduced to founders where that isn't the norm, I think it starts to breed this even more supportive network now, which is just lovely to see. Obviously, then that was tough. You'd reached a point where you thought, right, I need to go raise these funds. I remember it clearly, and as much as you probably think these bits of it were tough, but it was exciting and different. I'll always tell people it was one of the easiest jobs I've ever had to do was accelerating Pickle, because all of the core constituent parts were there. It was just one, I think, just as you say, just getting you into that world and having a practice, and getting the pitch out there and having arguments with me and thrashing things out, and then having a pitch.
I think our name change was also quite a key thing that came out at that point. Don't let a bunch of actuaries choose the name for the company. That's for sure.
My co-founder, Mrs., who was actually in on that one. I think she was quite heavily pregnant as well at the time.
Yes,
on that branding session.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
She was surrounded by people drinking coffee, and all she wanted was coffee. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a lovely story in itself as well, because people probably wouldn't know where Pickle had come from. It's an unusual spelling and jar and everything else. So where did that come from?
Well, so as you say, we decided that we needed to change our name. And
I hated the original name from the start. You know this.
Yes. I think we can all agree with that. So we needed to come up with a brand, and we did a sort of a really good brainstorming session, and we were trying to think about how people felt when they were going through the claims process and the experience, particularly with Airbnb, and they were feeling in a jam, in a pickle. Because there was, a lot of stuff happening. So, and I think I was the one that threw out Pickle, because my cat is called Pickle. And so I said, I've got, my cat's called Pickle. He's always getting in a pickle. And I think everybody at that point just went, yes, that's it. Of course, the PIKL, as dictated by a lot, is domain name driven. And it looked good. But that was how we got to Pickle. And then, I think one of the marketeers came up with the concept of actually, we're preserving the things that you love. And that's what you're doing with pickling. And that was very apt for the cover that we're providing for people.
I mean, I think that was almost a game changer with the raise as well, wasn't it? By that point, because I think the only missing dynamic really was that sort of lovely brand and logo and everything else that everything could hinge around. And that process of raising, And one thing I always tell people to do is actually go back and knock the door of your networks.
Yeah,
It's the first
I
port of
think
call.
that's probably the best advice you ever gave us. And actually, you know, we've now raised about 12.5 million in investment as it stands today,
Wow.
and we've pretty much exclusively done that by maybe a couple of million through our network, through our network of angel investors. So you know, we started off with the local angels, and you know, actually a lot of the people that invested us first off were people we knew. We had some people that we'd worked for, some people who were part of the local angel group here, the Anglia Capital, and then I think you introduced us to the concept of the you know, the Anglia Capital Local Enterprise Partnership, where they would do match funding as well. So that enabled us to really get the first part of our first round completed, with all of those things together, knocking on the doors of people we'd worked for, you know, those local angel groups, and that match funding with the local enterprise partnership. And initially, I think I was looking to raise about 800,000 on our first round. It was a seed round, so quite a large seed round, really. Now
But for an
in
insurtech business, I think we need to point out that's not unusual just because of the
no.
heavy regulatory burdens and hoops you have to jump through.
Well, that's right. You know, so we're as an insurtech, we're kind of like two companies. So you know, with a tech business, you've just got tech. You know, so you've got a tech team and you need to run it. With an insurtech business, we've got an insurance company as well as a tech business, and the insurance business has some very heavily skilled people, actuaries, underwriters, and people like that in it, which can cost, you know, as much as or if not more than a senior developer. So we do have some very heavy fixed costs that we have to have in place, because you have to have those two parts of your teams ready in order to launch a business. So yes, it does require a lot of startup funding. But yeah, so I think we had raised, you know, probably the majority of that 800. So we got to, I don't know, about 600-700 when I got introduced through my network to a chap called Sir Peter Wood. And he's the founder of Direct Line Group.
He knows a bit about insurance. Yeah.
He knows a bit about insurance. Yeah, I think he's started about 7 different insurance companies worldwide over the years. So he's probably the foremost entrepreneur in the insurance market. And it was through somebody that I had previously worked for at the RAC that I got the introduction to him. So again, it was just pure connection through the network. And I went and got invited to sort of meet him in his house in London, and we sort of took him through the business. And at the time, so he was sort of, you know, what do you want? And I'd said, well, I'm looking for about 100,000, I think, at the time. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. He said, I'd like to do 1 million. And I think he could have knocked me off my seat. Yes. No, exactly. You know, so that was probably one of the best moments, I think, probably of my startup journey, was the absolute elation, really, of getting that across the line, and the belief that he had in us, which was just fantastic. And I think I floated out of his house with his legal guys after that to get the deal done, which
Took a little while,
amazing.
I remember, but yeah, it's immense. Well, it wasn't pocket change that was being handed over either, was it? So let's be fair.
No, that's right. And in the end, I mean, the final raise actually came to 2.5 million. So by the time we'd actually completed it, so that was, you know, that was amazing, and that, you know, gave us a really solid foundation to then you know, sort of do that journey. And we managed to sort of fully launch the business, because we were only in pilot at that point. And we needed to bring in staff to really enable us to fully go for it and fully push out marketing. And so we were able to fully launch, I think it was in the March of 2019. And we closed the investment raise around about the May officially, but we'd had the commitment earlier on in that year. I think it was February. And so that was amazing. So we then had, you know, kind of first year of trading, which was fantastic. And then we were just, you know, getting to that first year when this pesky pandemic kicked in.
Yeah, with an Airbnb focused insurer as well. I mean, you must have thought, Great. I've got everything. We can now underwrite. We've got the right kind of team in place. And what now? So
Yes, yeah. I mean,
what that
we'd
look
had sort
like
of
at the time?
linear growth, so the curve was looking really good. It was, it was looking lovely. And then, we lost 90% of our revenue in that first lockdown, because obviously the Airbnbs were closed, and a lot of the products that we were writing at the time were pay on use policies, which were fantastic for the owners because they weren't using the properties. But yeah, so that first, March, April, was really quite horrendous. So I think, like many other companies out there, we were, we'd furloughed staff. We were renegotiating with every supplier that we had, to try and agree terms. We'd just taken a new lease on a building, because we were growing. And so actually at that point we were about to sublet our old office out, and then the people that were subletting that pulled out, and we thought, oh Christ, we're going to be left with 2 offices. So
In a pandemic. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it was really quite painful. And because we'd only started the company, a year earlier, we started trading a year earlier, we weren't eligible for any of the government relief packages, because you pretty much had to have 2 years worth of trading accounts to be eligible for anything. So I think that we got furlough, and I think that was pretty much it. I think we got business rate relief on one of our premises, but yeah, it was harsh work. But we were very, very fortunate that we had our angel investors behind us, and they all backed us. We did some bridge funding through COVID, and they sort of had belief in us as a business. So that was brilliant. And then of course the summer hit, and everybody, having been in lockdown for several months, wanted to then stay in an Airbnb. So we went from nothing to absolute
Staycation
crazy.
madness. Yeah.
Yes. And when we literally, I mean, it was, we almost had every single person in the company on the phone. We had to put everybody back in on furlough, because I think the phones started ringing just after Boris Johnson made his announcement about the unlocking happening. So it was literally, we just, couldn't get people in fast enough to then start fielding the calls. So we went, completely into boom over that summer period, and then straight back into bust again in the autumn when the lockdowns kicked in again. And so we had to go through that cycle of kind of boom and bust, really, until all the lockdowns finished. And that, was very, very stressful on the business, because we were starting from scratch almost every time. Our volumes, whilst they went up again, it was, you had to get the team moving, you had to get the motivation moving. And particularly when you're doing marketing campaigns, you haven't really got enough to learn. And it was so unusual as well. You'd see things going, and then you just didn't really know how to plan. So
And
it was.
did you lose any staff over that period as well? Was it difficult to keep hold of people? And
We did. There were a lot of people who just completely lost motivation with it, because they were being furloughed, unfurloughed, furloughed, unfurloughed. They could get stuff moving, and then they were back to square one again. And I think it was just the absolute frustration, that it took a long time. And also, our market took a beating as well. So that it changed the dynamics. So before the pandemic, the Airbnbs were fastest growing in the cities, in London, especially. In the pandemic, everybody wanted to stay in rural areas. What we saw was all the rural areas growing rapidly. Nobody was going to London. And actually, it took a lot of time for London to recover. It's only really in the last year, because as well, London was dependent on a lot of business travel that was using Airbnbs. And of course, business travel completely changed. So we were trying to grow, but the patterns were all completely changing. And so it was quite frustrating, I think, for many people in the team to keep that going. And we did lose people, but I think it was all really positive turnover in the end, because what we needed were people who were aligned with our mission and our journey and motivated. And if people had got to a point where they'd lost motivation, then that wasn't good, and that had an effect on other people in the team. And I think that there's one or two individuals that I think, in hindsight, we probably should have helped them move on a bit faster than we did. and because actually it does spiral motivation and the way to talk to other people in the team when there are people that are frustrated with what's happened. And so that's something that I think as a founder we've got quite good at now as a team, is making sure if people don't fit with our culture, that we move them on. And luckily, the vast majority of people that we've hired have been a brilliant fit. But it only takes one person that doesn't quite have
Get
that
the
same
culture and
culture. Yeah, and it's almost like a cancer. It can really take root before you know it. And it took us quite a while. It's really, I think, took us until probably last year at this time to get everything back onto a good footing with the business after all of that impact that we saw from COVID.
you built quite a decent peer network as well after that first round, didn't you? I think you went through a program with Technation and obviously through insurtech being probably a little more incestuous than you would say with SaaS as a whole or fintech as a whole. How much of a benefit and an aid was it having those peers around you who are going through the same stuff? Did you stay in touch with them? Did you help each other out and lean on each other through that?
Yeah, that was. I mean, I found the Technation Accelerator was really useful, and I still keep in touch with a number of founders there. We have a group that meets up regularly, and it's a allows us to really have a really private session where we can talk about what it's like being founders. It helps us to relate to some of the issues that are going on, because it can be a very it can be a very lonely journey as the CEO of a startup company, and it's really good to be able to talk and share with other people who are going through similar issues. So I really sort of value those meetups. But yeah, the Technation, I think, just hit the mark at the time for us in terms of where we are. It gave a lot of information about particular problems that people might be facing. So at the time, we'd just made our first hire for somebody in the US as part of our tech team, and we got a lot of help there setting up a US company. We also we're looking at developing the product team, our technology product team. And for me, that was quite new. I knew a lot about insurance, but I didn't know so much about building a technology business. So there was a lot of masterclasses and things there that were aimed at scaling your tech team, and that really was very helpful for us. So no, I've always found connecting with other founders, and in that way, really helpful, to help you on your journey.
Yeah, I remember your first sessions with John Ellison on the UX and UI side of things as well in the local office here. And all I remember was this sea of sticky notes as you were mapping out the user journey. So I know that crash course is hard for particularly non-technical founders. And I think that was one of the key things you actually had some element of genuine fear over. I think everything else you looked at thought, no, I can do this, I can overcome this. I can see the way out of this. I can see the way around it, over it. As a non-technical founder, how difficult has it been through that journey? Because I know you've got a great CTO now.
Yeah.
So what was that journey like in between? And how many frogs did you kiss? What was it like in terms of learning what you need to fit within Pickle as a CTO or somebody to actually lead that tech side of things?
Yeah, I mean, we did kiss quite a few frogs at the time. So initially, we worked with some people who helped us get the sort of technology off the ground, and they were incredibly helpful for us at the time. But looking back on it, and it's always fine looking back on it in hindsight, but it wasn't. It wasn't what we needed, really. It allowed us to get there, but it wasn't ever going to be the long-term solution. But I didn't know enough about the technology at the time and about some of the decisions at the time to know any better, really. I think it was only being connected through to the right people and then getting further down the journey and understanding the things that you could and couldn't do, that you realised, oh, okay, right, so that's not going to be, that's not actually going to work for us in the longer term. So It took us a while. It took us a couple of years to get to a point of going, okay, we're going to have to build something bespoke here. We went and spoke to lots of different companies. We did a pilot with another insurtech company that was, actually a technology company. And whilst they had an excellent product, it just wasn't going to fit particularly what we were doing for the sharing economy markets, because we have some quite different things going on, not just the fact that we've got usage-based products, but we've also got multiple different parties to our insurance contract, which was just going to make things difficult. So in the end, we decided we were going to build it. And it was actually, one of our shareholders who had a sort of tech background that helped to guide us into some recruiters that he'd worked with before, to start looking at people. And at the time I was looking, initially I just thought, well, we'll try and recruit in the UK. And I met quite a lot of people in the UK. And what I found was I met people who had worked in IT, and they had been, maybe leaders in IT, but they'd never coded or created software or been at that front line. And what I really wanted was somebody that could get in the weeds and do the coding, but it could also lift up and be a strategist. And that was very difficult to find. You either found lots of people that were very, very technical, but not somebody with the strategy side of things as well. And so in the end, I ended up, looking for a remote worker, and this was pre-COVID, so we were probably a bit of ahead of the curve, thinking it's fine, we're all doing remote working. So and I interviewed people across the world. There were some people in Europe and in Tel Aviv, and in the US, and in the end, the chap from the US was the one that fit best culturally. And I think he's been with us 5 years now. So 5 years on, 4 or 5 years on, that's worked really, really well. He has, and it just goes to show that for us the culture was the most important thing. The fact that he was remote in the US hasn't really made much difference for us, apart from we have to make sure we schedule meetings at the right time of day. But he does come over and visit us quite frequently. And we've been able to build that team, and he was able to sort of jump right in, pull apart the technology that we were already working on, help us rebuild it, and we've actually only just got to a point where we've discontinued using some of that original infrastructure. So it's taken us a while to get there, but we've now got really fantastic infrastructure that's really, really flexible, and I can't imagine now not doing it the way that we've done it. And I think we've got a really good product structure and good technology team structure.
Yeah, and you're not the only one to have been on that journey. I think every founder thinks they failed because MVP isn't great, or version 1 isn't great. And I think as long as you're listening, learning, and iterating, then that's the key thing. As long as you've got enough money to keep going, then they're the key bits. And one thing that we kind of probably glossed over as well is that I should point out to people watching this is that your initial proof of concept was obviously built offline. It was literally telephone calls, wasn't it, from the first 60 or so, pretty much, or website inquiries that you then converted into policies.
No. They could write online.
Hybrid.
So it was online. But I think we actually launched it only online for the first week or two, because I was the only person that could handle calls at that point. And what we realized was that people were hesitating with making a purchase. And so we put a phone number up there, and all of a sudden the phone started ringing lots because people had lots of questions. And actually that allowing people to ring us was a really important move, because I learned more from those conversations with our customers than we ever would have learned from just purely having a web-based solution. And that and even now today, I think actually the phone is the core part of what we do, because that's really where you get to hear and talk to your customers and find out what's going on. And we still have probably 20% of cases of what we're doing are the weird and wonderful, where we have to talk to those customers and really understand what's going on, and that helps you with your product development. It helps you understand what's happening. You know, we heard that there were a few regulatory issues happening in Scotland. We managed to hear that before any of it hit the press, and we were looking at it going, we're going to need to change some of the way that we look at our public liability limits in Scotland. We were already developing that product before the announcement came out, because we'd already got wind of it from some of our customers ringing us up with queries. Talking to your customers is always valuable.
Yeah, it's something I preach a lot, and as well, and definitely key in those early stages, because there's no point in building something that you haven't even checked whether people will pay for, or whether that problem even exists. Yours was a clear problem that existed, that you'd spotted, and obviously you're one of first 2 or 3 movers, which is fantastic. So some of those wouldn't have stayed the course through the pandemic either. So more kudos to you. And I know others, I know you're battling against bigger budgets with others. So maybe we'll move on to that scaling point next, and the competition, because you come out of the pandemic and things return to some sort of normality. And I guess that's when you look back again, you're kind of pulling your head out and going, all right, who's still around, and who are we up against, and where are they at? So how's that journey been? So initially when you launched, you were probably one of only 2 or 3 proper players in that game.
Yeah, there was about 3 of us. There was sort of one company in the US, and there was 2 in the UK. One and another one in the UK that literally launched around the same time as us. We've actually gone in all different directions through the course of the pandemic. So the company in the US completely pivoted and actually became a software technology seller, rather than actually focusing on the products themselves. The other company in the UK went down a different route altogether. So they sort of focused in on a different product that was needed in the short-term rental markets, and also technology solutions as well. So we've actually all pivoted in slightly different directions, which means that I don't really think we've got anybody that's a direct competitor, because the propositions of the others are quite different to us. We have got incumbents, people who sell holiday home insurance is probably the closest thing to us, but the holiday home insurance has a lot of cover missing for people who are doing Airbnb, and if you're doing Airbnb in your own home, then holiday home insurance isn't suitable. So we're still, I'm surprised still that the incumbents haven't really made a move to change that, but then again, I probably shouldn't be surprised, having worked in those companies for so long.
We talked about the cruise ship at the start.
How long it takes to change anything. So I think we're still pretty fortunate that what we're doing is quite hard. We've just launched our first sort of global products, and that's going very, very well. But actually selling a global insurance policy is very hard work. It's taken us about 3 years to get those products to market. We're doing it in partnership with a company that has a facility at Lloyd's of London. So that in itself is a very, very challenging task. And so we're in that category of hopefully stuff that is just quite difficult to do, high barrier to entry, which is very important to get out when you're looking at your moat, which I think I can remember the first time. How do you say it, Chris?
I knew this was going to come up at some point. Moat. Moat. Sorry, this has been a running joke for 6 years now. Is my pronunciation of moat. Moat? Moat.
Yeah, moat.
Yeah, for those that don't know why we keep shouting moat at each other, it's the thing that gives you a technical or otherwise an advantage over the rest of your competition, bit of distance between the two. Moat. The conversation we had about 6 years ago revolved around Louise sat there looking really confused. She's going, what are you saying? Moot. I had to literally
draw the picture of the castle with a moat around it before I was like, oh no!
Oh, you mean a moat? Yes. Yeah, one of those. So building your moat's massively important. But I think the way you built, because obviously your team has changed as well. The co-founders you've had have probably taken more of a back seat as you've grown. I think it was Jamie from Arm when we went over to Cambridge, and it was another scale-up event we did when you were on stage with him, I think, in Norwich as well, wasn't it?
Yes,
And
yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
it's weird the provenance behind him saying the team you start with isn't the team you scale with.
No, no,
And
that's right. Yeah.
um, obviously, you're still core 100% the one that's on the team, but the rest of the team has pretty much changed now, isn't it, in terms of its dynamics. And the original co-founding team are more sort of original angel investors, advisors, and still around the business, but not sort of working day to day in the main on it, are they? So
No, that's right. So, I mean, I had 4 co-founders who worked, for the first few years on the business. My CFO, my co-founder, is still with the business, and really the two
Richard,
of us are.
yeah,
That's right, yeah, Richard. And then the two of us, we wouldn't have got as far as we had if I didn't have Richard, behind me. That's for sure. But the others, also played a really key part in the journey. And but as you scale, you need different people and different skills, and they were people that were really brilliant for that early stage of the journey. Once you get to a team of 40 like we are now, you go through a point where you hit about 20 people, where things really start to change, and you really have to start putting some structure into your company, and you really have to start not flying by the seat of your pants so much, because the people that you're bringing in need that structure and need to know what to do, and that meant that we did need to bring in people with different skill sets and different mindsets. And it took a while. I brought in, some really good people. I brought in some people that didn't quite. I've had 1 or 2 people that weren't the right fit that we moved on. But now I've managed to get a really good structure, particularly for my direct reports. I think that was a bit of a game changer when we finally moved to a bit of a functional structure. So initially, I had quite a lot of people reporting to me. And now I've got a CFO, a chief technology officer, chief commercial officer, and a chief operations officer and chief underwriting officer. There's lots of chiefs. But that functional structure was really a game changer for us in terms of making sure that people have got really clear who was responsible for what, and had could have those goals set accordingly. And we had to go through a bit of a period where I'd had people who were reporting to me that were a bit more junior, and they didn't like it when we had to put different levels of management in. There was a lot that we went through, and it took us quite a while to overcome that, but it had to be done because you have to get yourself structured in the right way to scale, and we needed those functional areas in order to be able to segregate the duties and the responsibilities in a way to make that happen. And I think once we got that bedded in, we put that structure in place about 18 months ago now. That's really, really enabled us to scale. It took us from that 20 to 40 people. I think it will be a good structure for probably another 10, 20 people. And then I think we'll probably hit another critical mass point where we probably will have to start to move stuff around again. But I can already see potentially where that's going to go and how things are going to move, and the people that I've got at that top table are flexible enough to know that's where it's going to go as well, and that the role and the shape of the role that they has a time limit to it, and so I think that's something that as a founder, you've got to make sure that you do that. Your structures are going to be fluid, and you need people that can either move along with that, and happy to change. Otherwise, it's not gonna work as you scale.
it's been a absolutely phenomenal journey to watch as well. Occasionally from the inside, outside, pop in for a coffee, see how things are going once every 2 years, and um, yeah, it's been phenomenal to see. And I think obviously your background in terms of having not quite the same way, but working within a corporate and having to build things from scratch probably helped in terms of building those dynamics as well. So it's great. It's phenomenal to see you now scaling and come out the other side as the only players in essence in that market as well. So brilliant. So I guess the next bit is the nice bit is where do you go next now? What's the next steps and where do you go? Is it world domination? What are your needs and challenges in the immediate term?
Well, we're just at that really nice point where we've got, we've got the pathway to profitability now. So we hopefully will be starting to make a profit next year. So what we've been able to evidence is that our products are profitable. We are underwriting them well, and we are growing. We're still growing at sort of 200 to 300% year on year at the moment. And actually, hopefully next year we'll grow even faster than that with these global products. The early signs of that is we could jump really quite significantly. So we're at the point where we started off with single customers, one person, one policy. Then we moved into working with property managers, and we started to work with companies that had 10 or 30 properties. We were really chuffed when we won our first really big client a couple of years ago that had 500 properties. And actually we had to put quite a lot of infrastructure in place to be able to handle 500 properties.
Yeah.
Then we won a client last year. We started working with Sykes Cottages, and they've got 20,000 properties. So that gives you a whole different set yet again of problems to deal with, and we're still not fully live with everything that we want to do there with Sykes. So we're still learning, and actually, that process of being able to take a partner with 20,000 is going to keep us busy for the next 12 months. But actually, we've got another one of a similar size that's in the wings that we're bringing on. So what we want to be able to do is get to a place where over the next year or so we can onboard with relative frequency people that have got 20,000-ish properties, and hopefully those properties are going to be across the globe, not just in the UK. So that's what the next 18 months are going to look like, and a lot of that is really infrastructure. It's how do we make sure that the tech onboarding works well, how do we standardize things so that when we're onboarding them, obviously the first one is bespoke, but then you think, well, if we've got to replicate this, how do we make that easy to do? And then you've got to make sure you have the team in place to be able to do that as well. So we're actually just doing Series A right now, and this is all about scaling. It's about replication. We've got deals that have worked. We can point to them and go, here's the data, they've worked. Now what we're doing is just doing that multiple times over and over again. And that's really what Series A is about. We've been very unlucky. We had the pandemic when we first started, and then we had the worst inflation that the markets have seen in 40 years going out for our Series A. So we started that just when Liz Truss gave her budget last year. We had to then very
Lovely
quickly stop
budget.
it. Yeah. Well, the investment markets really closed. So we ended up doing another bridge round. We've pushed it back, and we've been very lucky. We're now in the very late stages of a Series A deal, which we hope will close over the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Phenomenal.
So that should hopefully enable us to then, really continue that scaling journey, and hopefully, that's going to be the last fundraise we need to do. We may want to do them to scale faster, but that's the last one we need to do.
Yeah, as a last resort.
Yeah.
No, that's phenomenal. And one thing we touched on before, obviously hitting the record button day, and I know this is something we both share similar views on, is the current state of the investment market as well, and underrepresented founders. Any advice you'd give to underrepresented founders out there who are sort of embarking on rounds or about to embark on rounds?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I've not found the venture markets particularly friendly, either as a female or underrepresented entrepreneur. And I think that there are a lot of companies that I've spoken to that say they deal with female funds, but in reality, I think they're playing at lip service. I was very saddened to see an article that was on Sifted that just showed how many women are leaving the venture capital markets because they are disenfranchised by what's going on. So I think it's a very sad state that we're in. I think that there is a lot of support out there, but it tends to be individual support. It tends to be people who are trying to make a difference, angel investors that are trying to make a difference. And I've always found them through my network, and I've been very, very fortunate. And the people who you just don't think are going to help you do and
you introduced me to one or two along the way, and they've been phenomenal people.
That's right, yeah, and then what happens is a bit of a chain effect. They'll introduce you to someone, and then that person might introduce you to another 2 or 3 people, and then those people might introduce you to, and that's how it goes. And I have found there is a lot of support out there, but it's in that network. There's not anywhere that I can point to say go to this website or go and look at this. It's about talking to as many people in your network, and we have done a couple of crowd funds. And that's really actually been very helpful from a network perspective, because it's brought those people out who, there's been a lot of people who've been watching my journey that I've worked with on LinkedIn, and I haven't even thought to get in touch with them. But once we did the crowd fund, actually they came out and said, well, do you know what? Have you spoken to so-and-so? Yeah, exactly. So that was, for us, the crowd funds have been an amazing journey too. We've raised quite well, and just got people that can back us and point us in the right direction and support us. So I'm very fortunate that thus far we've raised sort of 12.5 million. We haven't had a venture firm. It's all been angels and people in our network that really have believed in what we're trying to do, and have for the most part made a massive difference to us. The help and support we've had, we couldn't have done it without them.
I'd advise people who are watching as well to check out Pickle's social pages, because you do get kind of a masterclass of building in public as well, which I think is a huge thing. May not necessarily always be through your own personal pages, because you are literally one of the busiest people I've ever met. Especially when you were multi-skilling your way through those early rounds.
Oh, goodness me, yeah.
Yeah, it was the archetypal image of somebody running around with a mop up their arse as well at the same time. So, but still busy, just obviously focused on more strategic things these days than literally doing everything as you go along. But building in public, I think, has definitely helped in terms of sharing that journey with other people as you've gone along as well. And that's probably what made that crowdfund easier too. Yeah, thanks for those points on the market, and I completely agree with you. I would say, and I'm seeing this more at the lower level, there are more angels and more syndicates springing up, and I think we will see a more circular economy focused on underrepresented founders. Those people who do want to give back, and these are founder operators and people who have exited. And I just think that is the future. I think we're moving away probably from these funds with a very narrow focus, and maybe, hopefully, touch wood, this would be a dream, is that we get more syndicates and angel groups that just kind of go, throw us the deal. Doesn't matter what the check size is you're looking for, throw it at us. We'll have a look at it and see what network effect we can generate. And I think, personally, I'd love to see that as more of the future, and I think that should create more opportunities for more underrepresented founders. He says, in hope. And this is why I do where I do as well. So, yeah. Excellent. Arthur.
Hello, I've been listening all along. This has been awesome, as always. I think I've been to every one of these sessions now. Thanks so much, Louise. Do I have time for a question?
Yeah.
Just a real quickie. I'm really interested in how you basically felt you did have to break away from big insurtech, from big insurance in order to do what you've done. Scaling rapidly, do you have a sense that the ultimate future for Picky is to go back under the wing of a big insurer, or do you see the future of this kind of insurtech as being relatively independent?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's very likely we will go back under the wing of a big insurance company or insurance consolidator. And I think that so I've worked with those consolidators in the past, and if I go back, 4 or 5, no more than that, 6 or 7 years ago, there was a strategy of companies buying up other smaller companies, integrating them, and then often that went wrong, and you found a lot of people wanting to leave those companies. What's been happening over the last few years is that those companies have learnt that if they're going to buy and invest in these companies, they can't try and merge them. They need to leave them to run separately. And that seems to be working as a strategy. So I think it's likely we may well get acquired and come under the umbrella, but hopefully we'll still be standalone within that organization. It's just that we'll then be able to leverage the benefits of capital, underwriting expertise, and I think hopefully that could be a very bright future for us, but not yet. Hopefully we'll have another 5 or so years of this independent journey.
Absolutely, just to keep proving that category. It's a very interesting business strategy. It makes so much sense. You're like, look, I think this can work. I'm going to go out and do it, and then we'll talk down the track.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good luck.
And actually, that leads into some of what you were saying, Chris. A lot of the venture markets might not be open, but actually, a lot of the people who we've been talking to for the Series A have been the incumbents in the market, and they've got a really good strategic reason to be backing people in this market. And it doesn't matter what market you're in. If you've got strategic people like that, they're always going to be interested in helping you, even when the venture markets are being fickle.
Excellent. Any other questions, Arthur?
I think I could go on all afternoon, but I think that's unfair. I've really enjoyed listening to you, Louise. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.